Opening bell of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Connor Rogers joining you guys on a Wednesday to update the 2023 NFL draft order. 1 week left in the NFL season, so we are coming into the home stretch here, almost solidifying where these teams could be picking in at least the non-playoff teams, where they could be picking in the 2023 NFL draft. So we'll talk about a lot of where these teams are placing, and then also some players that could end up being part of these teams when it's all said and done. As you guys can notice about Connor's setting right now, a little different. You guys, have that familiar brick background. I don't hear New York's finest going in the background, like nothing like that. Connor's in Vegas, so I got to ask you, my man, how you doing so far in Vegas? You holding up? You up? You down? What's the story here?
I'm good. This is full day one, so you're catching me at my absolute best right now. Okay. Yeah, I'm rested. I'm good to go. I apologize to everybody that the pod might sound a tiny little bit different. I look a little bit different because of my setting. I got the old blurred background because you don't need to see my mess of a hotel room. I was telling Trevor before this, I was trying to raise my laptop because, God, I haven't had to move a camera in how long. And there's not even a Bible in this hotel room. So that's how you know you're actually in Las Vegas. I feel like that's the old trick. Like you just find the Bible book, put the laptop on it. Here we are, brother. You know how it is. So these next two shows, I will be in Vegas, but I will not be here long enough where it'll go beyond that. So we're all good.
I feel like you would need a Bible in a place like Vegas, right? I feel like that would, like if any hotel had it, I feel like it would have been Las Vegas, no?
First thing I saw when I walked through the casino lobby to the guest elevators was a woman at a slot machine with a 24-ounce can of Four Loko.
That is a warrior.
Where did you get that?
Right. First of all, I'm appalled. Second of all, where'd you get
impressed. That? Yes. Yeah. Ma'am. Yeah. So here we are. Ready to roll.
Right. Well, ready to roll here with this podcast. Look, we're obviously going to try to get through this podcast, updating you on the draft order. But of course, we're recording this on a Tuesday afternoon as the football world is reacting to the most serious thing that we have seen so far this football season with what happened with Damar Hamlin during the Buffalo Bills and Cincinnati Bengals game. Certainly between now and the time that this podcast gets released, we could get more news. Hoping and praying that it's positive news. And so like everything could definitely change. So as we go about this podcast, as we have these conversations about the draft, as we do talk about football, just guys know that our thoughts, our prayers, our main concern is with what happened there and what's going to move forward and happen with the NFL. So I just wanted to certainly say that all of our love to Damar and a lot of others that were affected by what happened on Monday night. There's just so many people out there that need the thoughts and the prayers and the love, and we're sending them all their way. So, as we move forward in this podcast, just wanted to make sure that everybody heard that right off the top from us. And Connor, I don't know if you had other words to say. I'll let you say them now.
Absolutely. When listening to this podcast, it's one that, obviously Trevor and I made the decision to go forward with doing this show this week. I think it helps that it is a draft focused show. It would have been really hard to do a what matters most kind of show because what matters most is the health of Damar Hamlin, his family. I know his mother was at the game, the friends, the Buffalo Bills family, the Cincinnati Bengals organization as well. And everybody involved in the situation, which is all of the football world, from the fans to everybody working in football, covering football. So it's one of those situations that I didn't want us, and I know you felt the same, to lose sight of that as we do this show today. I didn't want it to come off, tasteless or overlooking something of this magnitude. That quite frankly, I can't ever remember something of this magnitude, really, and at least in my time of working in football. So our thoughts are absolutely first, second, and third with that situation, and one that, really, really hoping the best of as we continue to think of everybody involved there.
Yeah. And just, before we move on, I just wanted to say this too. Social media has a way of bringing out the best and the worst. And in these sorts of situations, you see both of them. And all I'll say is, you can see the positives. You can see people coming together. You can see the voices and the opinions and the movements of the things that you want to gravitate towards. Latch on to those. I know that there's so many instances of people, and there's a lot of outrage for a lot of different reasons. But just as you go through social media when things like this happen, and obviously through this situation as well, gravitate towards and associate yourself with the positive. Like, be one of those lights that you see in this situation to come together for a situation like this. We've seen incredible things with Damar's toy drive and the people that are donating to that, and just so much more. And I just encourage everyone to, social media has a way of sometimes bringing out the best, but unfortunately the worst. Make sure you're gravitating towards the best, because there's a lot of good that humans can do when they come together in moments like this. So make sure that you are a part of that. No easy way to thank you. There's no easy way to transition from that to this, but I guess we'll kind of just get into it here. After almost all the week 17 games that we've got in the books now, Houston Texans, Connor, still picking number 1 overall. They are still half a game up on the Chicago Bears, who are picking number 2 overall. We got Denver back at that 3 spot, but of course they're not making that selection. It's the Seattle Seahawks that are making that selection there. Arizona all the way up to number 4. Indianapolis now at 5. Los Angeles Rams would be picking number 6, but their selection now with the Detroit Lions. So the Detroit Lions have the number 6 overall pick there. Atlanta at 7, Vegas at 8, Carolina with their loss to the Buccaneers, they are at 9. And then we once again round out the top 10 with an NFC South team. It would be the New Orleans Saints. But of course, we know that pick is held by the Philadelphia Eagles. So not a ton of change within the top 10, but it does seem like some of these teams are getting much more solidified in their position with the top 10. We know that controls the draft, Connor. So where does your mind go to first when you update the order and you see this list as it currently is in the top 10?
I think that, it's fascinating to watch a team like the Colts completely bottom out, in a sense that they're going to be picking in the top 5. They are going to have an opportunity to draft that quarterback that has eluded them for quite some time. And a lot can happen with this draft at quarterback. I think we've discussed that. We don't know the size thresholds or what the magnitude of the size thresholds will do to Bryce Young. I have leaned on the side, and I know you've leaned on the side, that he will go number 1 to the Houston Texans if they are picking number 1. He will, get over that. Teams will get over the size limitations with Bryce Young because of the talent he is, and personally, we think the floor that he has. But then the question really becomes, what does the league think of CJ Stroud, who had a really, really good showing in that semifinal, which matters a lot, but I don't know if it matters enough that I wouldn't call CJ Stroud a lock to go in the top 2 or top 3. I still think there are questions around his game against pressure, but once again, I thought that was a really good step forward for CJ Stroud, a player that I really, really like. And then Will Levis, who's the ultimate wild card in this entire thing, who we've said, Will Levis to the Colts for how long. So that's the one that sticks out to me, Trevor, because I think that the question with the Colts wasn't, would they take a quarterback? The question would be, would they be in position to take a quarterback? And what their coaching hire ends up being will have a big part in that. But I think it's safe to say that whether it's Stroud, whether it's Levis, it feels like that's another quarterback slot that's written in almost ink into the top 5.
Yeah, and there's a couple of quarterback situations now within the top 10 that have changed in different ways, even from last week to this week, right? You've got Indianapolis, you mentioned them. They're sitting at number 5, so they're kind of in the driver's seat as the team with the highest selection. Let's say Chicago ends up with the number 2 overall pick. They're going to hold a ransom for that pick for one of these teams to probably move up and go get a quarterback, just because the further down the line you get, the more you risk another team being able to come up and get your guy. So we know that Indianapolis is going to be fully involved in the quarterback market. Atlanta is picking at 7. Now, Atlanta, who do they play in the last game? They play the Bucs, I think, in the last game. And the Bucs are going to, they play Tampa. It's in Atlanta. Now, the Bucs are going to play their starters, but as we've seen throughout the season, it's not like that's been that imposing. So there's certainly a reality where Atlanta could win that game. Not so sure they do. So let's say that they get another loss here. They're probably going to be picking right around the same spot. Ritter looks okay, though. That's the update on this quarterback situation with the Falcons. He looks all right. And in fact, I don't mean for all right to be insulting. Last 2 weeks, I feel like Ritter has looked good. For a rookie quarterback, Ritter has looked good. Is that enough for you to not take a quarterback? Because you look on the other side of things, Connor. We talked about this in the What Matters Most podcast. Your defense gave up 340 yards to David Blau. Right? A David Blau-led offense. It's not good enough. It's got to start up front. There's going to be really good edge rushers to choose from in the top 10 of this draft class. Is that enough? I would lean at this point in time, Atlanta not taking a quarterback. I really would. Now, that just might be my gut here as we sit here to record this podcast today. But as of right now, I think Atlanta would go into next year with Desmond Ridder and maybe another option and be okay with it just because of how desperately they also need other playmakers. Quarterbacks, of course, what matters most. But I think that they could pass on it. Vegas, now very interesting. Since we have had this kind of podcast looking at the draft order, Vegas has benched Derek Carr. And all due respect, Jarrett Stidham, just going absolutely nuts this week. Not so sure that he's going to be the franchise quarterback. So I think they're in play now at number 8. And of course, it's very important with Carolina. No longer have a chance to make the playoffs. Now they have a chance to stick within this top 10 to go get a quarterback. All of these teams now, I think, are in the running. And we can officially call them in the running because they're not going to have a big winning streak down the end where they're not picking in the top 10. But I would say teams that I feel like are going to get the most aggressive for a quarterback in order. I would say Indianapolis is 1, and I would say Carolina is 2. Then I'd put Vegas, and then I'd put Atlanta. That's the way that I would put it. I would put Atlanta 4th out of those 4 teams. What do you think about that order in terms of those 4 teams and how aggressive they might be for a quarterback? Do you see it differently?
No, I agree with the order. I think I'm a little bit more convinced that Atlanta needs to take a quarterback than you are, because I think if Desmond Ridder is not good next year and they didn't take a quarterback, is Arthur Smith fired? Like, I have a legitimate question about that.
Sure.
So, which I'm not saying it's the right process. I'm just saying that's the political process. But
Terry Fontenot too, right? Their GM, because he's passed on quarterback a couple of times, you know?
Yeah, they came up short in the Deshaun Watson situation. Sounded like they were involved there, which led to the Matt Ryan departure.
Had a chance to take Justin Fields, didn't, you know?
Had a chance to take Justin Fields, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. It's really interesting. I wonder, they went the veteran route last year with Mariota. It didn't work.
Right.
So are you running that back? Like Ridder and Jacoby Brissett? You know, I'm just throwing names out there. Does Arthur Smith still love Ryan Tannehill? Is that a situation they could check in on? Like, I think the hardest part about this conversation, but what makes it the most fun, is that when you look at the Colts, Falcons, Raiders, and Panthers, and much lesser probably with the Panthers because they've done this too many times and it's failed, who is the team that trades for a quarterback and then is taken out of the draft situation? Right? Like, isn't that the variable in all of this?
Sure.
Is who's going to trade for, and I'm throwing names out there like Ryan Tannehill and things like that. But like, what's going to happen in Green Bay with Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers? What's going to happen to all these different places? Derek Carr, of course, who's on one of the teams in these 4.
Right.
There's going to be some kind of variable there because, quite frankly, here's a scenario for you, Trevor, that really impacts Atlanta. What if Atlanta wins this last game and picks after Vegas and Carolina? If that happens, I say no shot they could draft a quarterback. I just don't think there'll be a guy there for them.
Right.
For them.
Yeah, that might be their fate if they end up beating Tampa Bay, because then their strength of schedule is pretty low.
Is Tampa resting anyone?
No, it doesn't seem like it. It doesn't sound like they're going to rest. Now, like, maybe they do in the second half, but it did not sound like that. Todd Bowles was basically saying like, no, there's not really a plan to rest or sit starters. So now Atlanta's strength of schedule is one of the weakest strength of schedules in the NFL. It's 0.470. And that is the first tiebreaker when it comes to records. So if you got the same record, they look at strength of schedule. The teams that are 7-9 right now, their strength of schedule, 502, 504, 520, 532. So they're not even close. So if Atlanta loses another game, the lowest I think they're going to drop is from 7 to 10.
Yep.
I believe
that's right.
Is the lowest that they're going to drop. So it's not too far. But to your point, if you are dropping below Vegas and Carolina, you're not going to be able, I don't think, to just sit back. Like, you're not going to be able to just sit back and be like, oh, yeah, if a quarterback we like comes to us, because if that's the case, you might be drafting Anthony Richardson at 10. You know, you might have Bryce Young.
Ready.
go number 1. We might have CJ Stroud go number 5. We might have Will Levis go number 8. And then you're drafting Anthony Richardson at 10, which, look, I mean, you could go into next year and just play Desmond Ridder for a little bit, and then maybe Richardson will get ready at some point. Not the worst.
That's a good point. Maybe Atlanta's a situation that they think Ridder could be their bridge guy. Like sometimes I think we naturally might look at quarterbacks the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ridder being drafted in the 3rd round, even if draft media people had him as, a different range or whatever it may be, like Ridder in the 3rd round, you could sell it as like, hey, he's a guy that's a bridge guy to us, and we'd be really happy with that for a 3rd round quarterback. That's actually that's overachieving. If you're drafting the 3rd round, you turn to a solid bridge guy, like that's overachieving compared to quarterback hit and miss rates. So that makes them one of those spots.
It was a brilliant idea that I literally just thought of right now, and I'm not going to let the people know that. I'm going to let them think that I formulated that before the podcast, and it was well thought out, and I had the right time to bring it up. No, absolutely. That's actually the fun of this podcast for me and you. This specific episode is
we talk through scenarios.
We literally just talk through scenarios, and there's some
talk about the show at all until we do it.
There are some things
this show, not the other shows.
Yeah, we do plan a little bit more for the other ones, but I do think it's an organic conversation. And speaking of conversations, while we're talking about quarterbacks, I do want to talk about what happened this past weekend during the college football semifinals and then also the Sugar Bowl too. Bryce Young, man, I went into Saturday having no dog in any fight. I didn't really care who won any of the games. The only thing I really cared about, please don't get hurt. Anybody on any team. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I don't have those thoughts anyways, but with Will Anderson and Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs specifically saying, yeah, we're going to play in the Sugar Bowl. I did not want to, first and foremost for those guys, want to see them get hurt at the very end of their college careers. But I also didn't want to read people on Twitter's opinions about all this stuff that just really doesn't have to do with young men making their own decision. Right. But thankfully, we don't have to talk about that. Thankfully, on the other side, we get to talk about an unreal performance to cap off Bryce Young's career at Alabama. And it was such a performance that continued to echo what he has been his entire career, that he has been a starter at Alabama. And to me, Connor, he's the number 1 overall pick. I know that's not a hot take here on this podcast, but you mentioned it at the top. People are going to talk about his size. He is such a unique quarterback in many ways. Maybe the most is that the NFL is going to overlook size this much for this kind of player to take him number 1 overall. But I think you have to do it. So do you have any thoughts on Bryce Young? We're going to talk about CJ Stroud in a second, but like some thoughts on Bryce Young.
I mean, I love him. I think he does all the little things right while playing at an advanced level mentally, right? I think that's how I kind of look at him, where, I haven't brought up a comp for Bryce or anything like that, but like if somebody is saying like, if you're trying to find, well, how can a guy like that succeed at that size? And I think you really do look at the low-hanging fruit option of a Drew Brees and go, some guys that are, a little smaller, physically limited, but play the game so much faster than the average player at that position with touch and accuracy and resetting the pocket and doing all of those things. They're just going to be successful at the position. And, you got to put the right pieces around them. And you could say that about any quarterback. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, I'm with you all the way. I look at Bryce Young and think if you're a team at the top that needs a franchise quarterback, we got a huge game this week with the Texans and the Colts, a really big game that could swing this conversation. But we'll go into this show assuming that it would be the Texans. I mean, that's a guy that you want to start your franchise rebuild with, in my opinion. A distributor like him that truly plays the position like a point guard. He can throw accurately at all 3 levels. He's got mobility. I think he'll protect his body pretty well at the next level. That is a trait to me, the ability to maybe be a smaller guy, but also understand what you can and can't do. So I'm with you all the way. I'm just super impressed every time I watch him. I don't see a ton of people picking holes in his game, but I just hope that doesn't happen throughout the draft process, because I think it would be kind of foolish. I don't want to say he's a bona fide number 1 overall pick, because I still think Will Anderson's the best player in the entire draft, but we know the importance of quarterback. And I think when I eventually stack quarterbacks and then try to do comparisons from the last couple of classes, I think Bryce will be pretty high on the list, to be honest with you.
I mean, I just, from what I saw this weekend, again, it was just more fuel on the fire of like, I think that he's the top quarterback in this class.
The guys that come to mind that I would have ahead of him a pretty short list. Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow.
Yeah, for sure.
I
For
mean,
sure.
after that, I really like him that much. I really do.
Yeah, because like Kyler's the comparison, right? But
Mm.
because to me, Kyler had a better arm than Bryce. Like Kyler had a better arm with
Yep.
both distance and velocity, and so that matters. Like Kyler was a smaller, athletic quarterback, and I also think Kyler's more athletic than Bryce is. So I just
Definitely.
think that he has more athletic gifts than Bryce Young does. But Bryce Young, again, what he brings to the quarterback position between the ears, if you will, through his eyes, how he sees the game, how he processes the game, it's at the highest level. I've watched Burrow so many times over the last couple of years, and there's so many people who look at Burrow and go, all right, not really that mobile, not a super tall guy, not a huge arm, like a fine arm, but not a huge arm. He's got the small hands. Obviously, you worry about the fumbling issue. Does he take too many sacks? All this stuff. And yet, Burrow's just one of the best. He's just tier one.
Yep.
It's because he gets it. He just understands how to play the position at an elite level. You don't want too many athletic deficiencies, of course, that goes into your scouting report. But for a guy like Bryce, who's done it at the highest level the last 2 years, it's hard to poke too many holes in this game. CJ Stroud, on the other hand, so Stroud plays against Georgia. And you and I went into this matchup when we talked about this last week. This was going to be huge. Right or wrong, fair or not, this past weekend was going to probably be the game which everyone judged CJ Stroud for. Probably a little bit too much if he performed well, which he did, or it would have been too harshly if he performed poorly. Thankfully for him, he performed extremely well. Connor, I really do believe that if Marvin Harrison Jr. is in that entire game, Ohio State wins. I think Ohio State wins that game.
I agree.
And that's just because
he's unguardable.
He was unguardable. And that's just because of the connection that those two guys have and how well CJ Stroud was playing. We've mentioned Stroud on this podcast before, and when we've talked about some strengths and weaknesses, we haven't fully done our quarterback rankings yet. But a big issue with Stroud was how he dealt with pressure. Last year, he had a PFF grade of low 60s under pressure, which is fine, but it's not the best. This year, before this past weekend, a 38 PFF grade under pressure. Terrible. He's been awful under pressure this year. Had only 3 big-time throws, 7 turnover-worthy plays. The completion percentage was terrible as well. He could not deal with pressure all year long. And with Ohio State's soft schedule, you went, oh, boy, struggling under pressure against some of these teams in the Big Ten. Now he goes up against Georgia, neutral site. Connor, he had an 82.5 grade under pressure, which is extremely high under pressure this past weekend. He truly saved his best game for last against Georgia. And he played so well that I really do think people saw what they needed to see from CJ Stroud enough to say, that's it right there. I can work with that. I don't have to use my imagination to think about what CJ Stroud could be under pressure. If we get him used to it, if we get him a good offensive line, if we teach him, to make the right read, the right hot reads, the movement in the pocket, all this kind of stuff. If, you don't need if anymore. You saw it. Now it's been visualized for you, and you could say, let's make that more consistent. And I truly believe that part of his game and that part of what we saw this past Saturday is what's going to lock him into the top 10 for sure. But I think he's back into that conversation as a top 5, potentially even a top 3 pick because of what he did against Georgia.
I think so too. I think with Stroud, number one, the thing you're going to hear with him is like, well, you have to build a good infrastructure around him. Don't you have to do that with any young quarterback?
Of course.
This whole idea of like draft a guy and expect him to be a superhero is just like, it's just not how things work. I think that was Trevor Lawrence year 1. And now you see Trevor Lawrence with better structure in year 2, and you see the difference it makes. And, you could say that about a lot of young quarterbacks in the league. So you can evaluate things in a vacuum. I think Stroud needs to get better under pressure, but I also think Stroud absolutely can get better under pressure. He just turned 21 in October. This is a former 5-star quarterback. He was the number 2 pro style quarterback in his class. He goes to Ohio State. He's played at a really high level for 2 years. He just played at a really high level against the best team he was going to see all year, the best defense he was going to see all year. The confidence he plays with, he is athletic. That's the funny thing with Stroud. He's a pro style quarterback that doesn't really tap into that athleticism too much. In the biggest moment of the year, he tapped into that athleticism to extend some plays, to pick up some yards with his legs, to try to reset the pocket or at least get out of the pocket, manipulate the pocket. So I really like CJ Stroud in terms of He's got all the arm talent he needs. He's obviously a team leader, a team captain. It seems like guys really, really like him. Seems like a bright guy. I think that it's going to be interesting for me as the league has a lot of guys that are true mobile quarterbacks. He's a little bit more of a traditional pocket passing kind of quarterback, but I don't say that as an insult at you. As you look at, there's plenty of good pocket passing quarterbacks in this league. So I look at Stroud and think he should go in the top 5 because of the position he plays and because of the talent he has and because of the level he has played at, while understanding that there are things you have to develop and things that you have to have a plan for, most notably to protect him, because he's not somebody that can just run for his life all the time or really wants to run for his life all the time. So I'm with you, Trevor. I'm fascinated to see his process. I'll tell you this, like, for me, he's the number 2 quarterback in this class. I'm not even toying with the idea of projects like Levis and Richardson over him. I actually think there'll be a pretty sizable gap. Like Bryce will be QB1. There'll be a little gap to Stroud, and then there'll be a big gap to those other 2 guys.
For you, or what you think the NFL is going to do?
For me, for the NFL, no. I actually have it in my brain that somehow Will Levis is going to be the second quarterback taken by the NFL.
He might, man. As we kind of uncover what other teams are thinking with quarterbacks, obviously that's always a fun part about draft season. We'll dig into the other positions as well as some other teams that we've got in the top 20 here. But first, a shout out. Want to give shout out to our friends over at BroThrow. If you ever bet on sports with your friends, well, now BroThrow is the only sports betting platform that allows you to bet directly with friends in all 50 states. All right. No fees, no juice, no middleman. The way that they do it is because this is a social platform. BroThrow is not a sports book, and not paying juice on the sports books saves you a ton of money in the long run. Take control of who you bet with, know who's on the other side of every bet you create or accept, and easily create and accept bets. You can also track your profits and payments, see the value of your bets every time you make one. You don't have to deposit money into a BroThrow account either. Bettors pay each other directly through Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, Skrill, Strike, whatever's most convenient to you. Betting $11 to win 10 at a sports book absolutely stinks. All right. With BroThrow, you bet $10, you win $10. It's as simple as that. Go throw all your first bet at brothrow.com/stock and use the promo code STOCK to join the group. BroThrow is free to sign up for. You can cut out the middleman, start betting on BroThrow, just you and your pals. That is brothrow.com/stock. All right. I'll open it up. Rest of the top 18, I'll say. We'll cap it at these playoff and non-playoff teams. So 11, we got the Tennessee Titans. Oh boy, it may have been in a free fall. I mean, the Tennessee Titans were picking like 24-25 not too long ago. Now they're on a massive losing streak. They've
lost 6 in a row.
Six in a row. They were 7-3 at one point. Now they are 7-9, picking number 11 overall. Brutal. And they play the Jags this upcoming weekend. So I mean, let's face it, they're going to lose. So they're going to get another. They're going to get another loss in there. Tennessee might be picking in the top 10 when it's all said and done, which is wild to think. Cleveland Browns are picking 12th, but of course that pick is owned by the Houston Texans because of the Deshaun Watson trade. New York Jets. Sorry, Connor. Higher in the draft.
5 in a row.
Oh, also lost 5 in a row. 7-9 here on the season. They're picking 13th overall. Washington Commanders now eliminated from the playoffs. Used to Ron Rivera. 7-8-1.
I was going to say, somebody tell Ron Rivera.
On the season. Pittsburgh Steelers. Dude, Mike Tomlin's the effing man. How does he do it? How does he do it?
This is the most impressive one. This is by far the most impressive one.
How does he do it? They're picking 15th overall right now. They're 8-8. They could end the season above 500 yet again. Wild. Green Bay Packers picking. Go ahead.
Remember when Mike Tomlin met Chase Young on the sidelines and he goes, "I'm never bad enough to get players like you." He was right.
Spot the lie. I can't.
And it's just so funny when he said that because it's like the man is right. He's not even close. Close.
No. What's the highest the Steelers have picked in his era?
In a Tomlin era?
Yeah. Because
the worst they've ever done is 8-8. So I don't think they've ever picked in the top 10 in the Tomlin era.
Steelers draft pick history. I gotta look.
They traded up for Devin Bush. That was up to 10.
They did trade up for Devin Bush. So he's been the head coach since 2007. All right. Lawrence Timmons 15, Rashard Mendenhall 23, Evander Hood 32, Marquise Pouncey 18, Cam Hayward 31, David DeCastro 24, Jarvis Jones 17, Ryan Shazier, 15. Okay, it looks like it's 15. Bud Dupree, 22. Artie Burns, 25. TJ Watt, 30. Terrell Edmonds, 28. Devin Bush, 10, but they picked 20th that year, and they moved all the way up to 10. Yeah. Chase Claypool, 49th. They didn't have a first-round pick. Najee Harris, they traded that one for Minka Fitzpatrick. Najee Harris, 24th. Kenny Pickett, 20th. The highest the Pittsburgh Steelers have picked in the Mike Tomlin era is 15.
Naturally, yeah. Wow. Yeah, so and even if they lose this last game, I mean, they're going to be outside the top 10.
Yeah. Yes, they are. They're picking 15th right now. Green Bay is also 8-8. They're currently picking 16th. Detroit, then 8-8 as well. They're picking 17th. Green Bay and Detroit play each other, so we'll see which one of those teams could potentially vault themselves up into playoff consideration. And then the Miami Dolphins right now are on the outside looking in. They're 8-8 and they're picking 18th, but their pick was forfeited. Their original pick was forfeited there, so they're not picking that anyway. So it gets only 17 to talk about. Connor, outside of the ones that we just shouted out right there, or maybe you want to go into more detail on some of these teams. People would probably like to hear a little bit of Jets, but I'll give you the floor on who you want to talk about next.
Well, the Jets at 13 and Washington at 14 is interesting because I think both will look at veteran quarterback again, right? I feel like what Washington, I mean, I would love to see what Sam Howell has, but we just know that we didn't get to see that this year.
Yeah, did we get any update there? I think Ron Rivera updates the quarterback situation on Wednesday, so I think we're a day late.
Okay, so we'll know for the next show. Both of these teams are probably going to be attached to Derek Carr rumors. So I'm not thinking quarterback here for either of these teams. I think both obviously have their needs. The Jets will look to get more pieces on that offensive line. If they cut Carl Lawson, they'll be thinking this could be the home for Jared Verse or one of the edge players. Man, Green Bay has a huge impact on the draft here because now they're on this 4-game win streak. They can make the playoffs. And then you have to wonder who is going to be under center for them next year. Is it going to be Aaron Rodgers or is it going to be Jordan Love? It feels more likely that it'll be Aaron Rodgers, but then does Jordan Love want to be traded? And does that go back to the conversation of the Colts, Falcons, Raiders, Panthers, Jets, Commanders again? So there's a lot of connections here on this back half.
If the Packers make the playoffs, Rodgers is certainly not retiring. Right. I mean, like he's going to be coming back
unless they won the Super Bowl, which is a long shot.
They're not going to win the Super Bowl. Sorry, Packers fans, you're not going to win this. You might be the playoffs. You're not going to.
I won't say it, but you could say it.
No, they're not.
I don't think they will either. But that man,
you're protecting yourself. That's how you survive in this business.
I'm absolutely terrified.
That's how you survive in this business.
The door lock. How do you make it this far, folks? You hide.
You don't bet against Aaron Rodgers. That's what you don't do.
No,
I don't
think
Tom Brady. But I do think that Green Bay versus Detroit, that's going to be an incredible matchup that we've got here in Week 18. So even if the Packers don't make the playoffs, I think they have played well enough lately to where you go, okay, this is the vision. Like this is what we wanted. We start off next year like this, and we actually get to build on it. Then you're really talking about something special for this team. So I don't think Aaron Rodgers is leaving, which puts Jordan Love on the trading block. I would think to try to get an asset for him. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll hold on to him. But, man, I think that a lot of these other teams would certainly be interested in him. Tennessee is the wild card for me, right?
They really are.
Because what does Tennessee do? Tennessee needs offensive line. I think they need offensive weapons. They need playmakers. I don't know what their cap space is off the top of my head. If you want to look that up while I'm ranting here, but there's no wide receivers to pick up in free agency anyways. Maybe some offensive tackle help that you could get in there if they have enough money. What do they got? Not good.
They are almost 18 million in the red.
Yikes.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that bad. And I know they have cuts to make, but still.
But still, you're probably, I don't know how big of a splash that you can make there. And then, of course, the most important question is quarterback. What are you going to do with quarterback? Brian Tannehill's 35 years old. We talked about this on Monday.
Oh, a lot of money next year.
He's 36 mil on the cap, but you could save about 18 million if you cut him, right? So they could certainly cut him.
You're stuck with almost 18 dead.
But you're stuck with 18 dead for sure. And who else is on the roster?
Malik Willis.
Well,
they don't even think he's close.
They're starting Josh Dobbs again.
Exactly.
So Is Mike Vrabel going to swallow moving on from Ryan Tannehill, knowing how much it hurt their team last year when they moved on from A.J. Brown? I don't think he can do that. I don't think.
No, I think they run it back with Tannehill one more year and don't draft a quarterback. I really do. I'm looking at this roster and the salary construction of it, right?
They're just stuck.
They're almost 18 million in the red. And when I say in the red, people, I mean that means they are over the cap. Taylor Lewan has basically missed 2 of the last 3 seasons. If they cut him, there's no dead money. They save about 15 mil. So that gets them close to out of the red. But then they have a Lewan now. Lewan is probably 30. Lewan is 31.
Okay.
So next year will be his age 32 season.
Has he been terrible, though? I mean, like, I feel like they're almost at the point where
he hasn't been healthy.
You can't get rid of him. Because what's your offensive line without him?
They learned this year. It's horrible.
God,
they're going to cut Robert. They're going to cut Robert Woods and save 12 mil. But like, there's not, when you look at these rosters, there's not a million guys that you cut and go, okay, we're out of it. Like, the Titans aren't like that. This is really a roster that was meant to win the last 2 years, and they just haven't gotten over that hump.
They got the 1 seed last year, right? And think about what they were the year before, right? They were the giant killers the year before. So they were the giant killers in the playoffs 2 years ago, and they got the 1 seed last year. This team, I agree with you. This team's fall from grace is coming while they're in the final year or 2 of a winning window, which always really complicates things because it makes it really difficult to move on from players that you were invested in because your contracts probably aren't built like that.
They're not.
This is
pretty overwhelming.
As draft guys, there's certainly a way that we can look at situations and go, okay, if you want to flush the toilet and hit the full rebuild, we can do that, right? We can look at contracts and say, okay, cut this guy, cut this guy, cut this guy. But at the end of the day, is Mike Vrabel going to do that? Mike Vrabel doesn't seem like that kind of coach. They've got an open GM seat, so perhaps the sell for the next GM is, look, accelerate the rebuild. Let's swallow the pill this year. And
the Giants, what the Giants did this year.
Yes.
Giants somehow won because of coaching, not because of the roster.
Yeah, I think that might be what you need to do. I think the Titans are basically in a let's try to be the Giants of next year, I guess.
See if we can win with our veterans while we're trying to get over their money.
Yeah.
Because next year, when you literally look at the construct, this is an offense that was built on Derrick Henry, who will be 29 next year, and the final year of his deal. If you cut Tannehill, you say if you want to tank, you cut Tannehill.
Mm-hmm.
But you're saving about 17.8 million. You're also on the hook then for almost 19. The Bud Dupree contract's bad.
How long do they still have that though?
Next year you have to keep him.
Oh boy.
Next year you would save 9.3 mil, but you'd be on the hook for 11. So I guess you can cut him if you're just in cap hell.
Yeah.
But almost 11 mil of dead money of 30-year-old Bud Dupree that's called cap hell. I didn't realize this with the Titans. I knew it wasn't good. I didn't know it was. I don't ever want to use the word insurmountable because the Giants found a way to compete this year while going through this exact thing. But the AFC is a different animal, man. It's hard to take on the Mahomes, Allens, and Burrows of the world and Herberts of the world when you're dealing with this. So Tennessee, you're right. Tennessee, it almost makes you wonder, Trevor. Say Tennessee loses to Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
And the pick goes into the top 10.
Yeah.
Do you almost have to trade the pick because you need as many young assets as you can get?
Yeah, maybe. But you don't want to trade back too far, right? Because if you're trading back, you still got to get an off. Yeah, you got to get an offensive lineman.
You probably have to sit and take the tackle. Yeah, I think because you can't miss on that, and it's so much of Vrabel's identity of this rushing attack.
Right. Because who else? Who would be trading up?
Yeah, it would be coming up for the last quarterback.
Maybe. There's offensive linemen to pick. There's edge rushers to pick, right? There's other players to pick, but
Does somebody fall that's just really good?
Yeah, I
But
mean, like
guys fall.
I mean, Pittsburgh might trade up with you to go get their offensive lineman, but then at that point, are you like, hey, let's trade our pick, which we need O-line, to this team because they're going to pick O-line? It
It's
just
like
feels
the
very odd.
Commanders and Saints situation, right? And I think the Commanders are really happy with Jahan Dotson, but when they traded that pick, it was like, why did they just let somebody come up and get Chris Olave or whoever receiver they wanted, and then they moved back and took a wide receiver? It was like you were thinking like that at the time.
Yeah, it worked out for him, but how often?
I mean, Olave is a lot better though.
That's true.
It's a weird one. It's like
Jahan's
Dotson
good.
Doesn't look like a Jahan Dotson's had a really nice rookie season, but it's like the guys that went ahead were better. So it's like, how do you evaluate that?
Yeah,
you like the return of the trade, so you like that.
Yeah, what was
they got? I mean, they did pretty well in terms of the return of picks. I'd have to actually look up the trade. I remember at the time I was like, oh, they got a lot. That's why they did it.
Man, all of a sudden, Green Bay is in a great spot to get a playmaker in this draft. Like we don't think the wide receivers.
We'll talk about it for 4 months and they won't take one.
Yeah, probably.
It's true.
Yeah. Detroit, I love Detroit's position right now.
I mean, Detroit is just playing with house money.
Detroit's in a money spot right now. Now, what happens with Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator? We talked about this on Monday. That's going to mean the world because Jared Goff looks good with Ben Johnson.
But they did develop Ben Johnson developed there, so you wonder, can they do it again? I mean, he was like their tight ends coach 2 years ago. That's impressive.
I know, it's super impressive. But it's 6.
This coaching pool, man, it's like
it is strong.
You got Sean Payton.
Yeah.
You got DeMeco Ryans and Harbaugh. Yeah. And then you're like, what else?
No, I think there's
you like the coaching pool.
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah. I mean, you throw Ben Johnson in there.
Hot on it.
You throw Dan Quinn in there. Shane Steichen's in there. Gannon got looks last year. Trying to think of some other ones, but
Reich get interviews.
Frank Reich could get interviews. Certainly,
Reich is a solid coach.
Yeah. Ajiro Evero from Denver, I think, is somebody who could very well get some head coaching looks. I think that this is a decent pool.
Maybe it's better than I thought when you go through it like that.
So if that's the case, then yeah, I mean, maybe a lot of these draft strategies could look a lot different. And maybe that opens up the door to, if there are a lot of other candidates and there are a lot of other guys who could fill a lot of these vacancies, maybe you get Ben Johnson back. And if you're the Detroit Lions, you could draft edge rusher in the top 10 with wherever that top 10 pick's going to be from the Rams. And then you can go get corner at the whatever your pick ends up being, early 20s, late teens, something like that. And then it's just like, boom, boom, now we're talking. Actually, shoot,
Lions?
Maybe you don't even need the defensive line. That is James Houston erasure, and I won't have it. Not anymore.
What about Miles Murphy then? A guy that can give you a little more flexibility.
Nah, Brian Brzee. Or Brian Brzee to play next to Slim McNeil. That's what I want.
Slim. Boy, he's a beefy boy. Yeah, that they got a lot of potential with what they could do, and they need to do it. I mean, they still have their shortcomings on defense. So this is really great for the Lions that they have 2 top 20 picks, one in the top 20, one in the top almost 5, top 10. We talked about the Texans last week, so we won't recap that package situation.
Washington also might be hella desperate for a quarterback. And when I say might, I mean, they probably should be. So what do you do when you're picking 14th, right?
My gut says they'll have a veteran to compete with Howell.
Oh, right. You did say that when you were talking about them and the Jets. Yeah.
But I also it's throwing a dart when you don't know who the hell the coach is going to be.
I don't think it's going to be Rivera. You think they're going to?
Oh, you think? Okay. I don't know.
I don't think they're going to can Rivera. I'd be sure.
No, because are you going to get better than him? I know the fans right now are very, very upset with him.
Well, the fans, understandably so, just want change like across the board in Washington. Yeah, just like
they're sick of it.
Yeah, they're sick of it, and I don't necessarily blame them. I think Ron's a good head coach. I definitely think ways in which they went about things this offseason and certainly the beginning of the season and with the quarterback changes that have not been good. But when you hitch yourself to Carson Wentz, it's not going to go well. We've seen that too many times over the last couple of years. So they got to move on for Carson Wentz. I think that's first and foremost, just whether or not is Ron Rivera attached to Carson Wentz, because he said himself, I vouch for Carson Wentz. I watched the tape. I said that we should go get him. So if you're moving on from him, if he's not your guy, does that mean Rivera's not your guy anymore? I think that's
you take the fall. Yeah.
Another head coaching vacancy that could be open that I guess we will be talking about here. All right. Anything else before we get out of here? Any other teams, any other shout outs, anything like that?
No, I think that covers it well. I mean, it's going to be really interesting. Denver has a huge pick at the end of this draft, but we'll get into that down that. It's easy to do the end of the draft or the next layer of the draft when this playoff picture is kind of settled. So next week will be a big one for that.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's the next week. We think we're getting the final order. We're getting the final order of the top 18.
One more full what matters most. Isn't that crazy?
It is indeed. It is indeed. We got one more podcast before we get to that, though. We're ranking tight ends, folks. We're looking at the 2023 NFL draft class, and we are looking at the tight end position, and we're ranking them. We're ranking them like we have over the last month for some other positions. We'll give you our top fives. We'll give you some guys that are just outside the top five. Connor's already watched all these guys. He's an overachiever. I still got to get to the tape here on him. But
don't give me credit for that. I needed to do my homework before I left for the trip. So that's the only reason they're all done. And I'll say this.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be the easiest position group we watch this year. Let me get that out of the way.
Are they good, though?
Not like these are the rank. The top five are very good.
Oh,
and it's just,
let's go.
I mean, I'm hoping that I come across some sleepers in the next couple months, but I watched this group and I was like, this is pretty cut and dried. Like there'll be some discussions within the top five. Really should be 2 to 5, not number 1. But it just like, remember running backs? We sat there and we're like, I had 8 guys that could have been the 5th one. Not this time, partner. Not this time.
We will definitely break down whatever those top 5 end up being, and we'll talk about their strengths and weaknesses, where we think they could be drafted, how they could help your NFL teams out there. Hit us up on Twitter. After this episode, we always love to hear from you guys. It's a draft conversation for us. We take a look at the draft order and we just go basically on this podcast. We spew what comes to our mind, some imagination on certain picks, certain strategies, everything, scenarios, all that good stuff. Let us know what you guys think about your favorite team or about the draft in general as we're shaping up to get to the final order a week from now. If you're watching this on YouTube, a great place to do that is in the YouTube comments. So hit us up there. We always read those, or on Twitter at Tampa Bay Trey, at Connor J. Rogers. You can hit us up on Instagram as well. We read all your comments there so that you guys can get in on the show. Appreciate everybody listening. We got one more episode for you here on Thursday. We're going to rank these tight ends. We're going to tell you everything you need to know about the 2023 tight end class when it comes to the NFL draft. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That's Connor Rogers. Until then, thank you guys so much for listening to the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. We'll see you then.